So, what were the strategies that teachers were using in order to be good teachers? So, first of all, the teachers thought that their work was relational. So, they were working with children on things, and their goal was to make the processes explicit to children, how we do things. That as a teacher, they worked to connect two ideas. So their job was making things explicit, they were connecting ideas together, and they were using or responding to pupil input. When they were teaching, modelling was a big part of what they did, and the role of the teacher was either they led an activity or they assisted in the activity, and that the teachers thought carefully about artifacts, objects that were used in the teaching, or how they designed an activity so that children were connecting ideas and understanding how things should be done. So, in terms of what was important for the process of teaching, teachers all agreed that what was important for teachers was not so much knowing about subject knowledge, but about knowing how to work with the school curriculum. And so from that, there were some key messages in what teachers thought really good teaching was. So, really good teachers, they thought, were able to keep learning going in a lesson, were able to adapt their teaching, and were able to use a wide choice of strategies. Some of those strategies I've talked about. And that they thought that as a teacher, it was important to know what was important to and for children, but for themselves what was important was how they inhabited, how they were present, how they showed up in the role of the lesson, of the role of teacher for the lesson for the pupils. So what this came down to was the skill of teaching was being able to get children to work together, being able to get children to work together. And what they said was, what was number one important was that teachers showed that they cared. And they showed that they cared by giving key messages that what we're doing is important, what we're doing is interesting, that I care that you get it. So there's some exchange here, some mutual investment, me into you, that both teacher and pupils laugh and have fun in the lessons, that I give to you and I shape what we're doing to fit you, and that the tone of the lesson, the initial hook, means that you can be involved. That the message I give is that you as a pupil will get a good deal, that I will make sure that I present this in different ways for the different individuals, and that as a teacher I show that I care by recognising the humanity of the pupils. So I won't expose you if your behaviour is bad, and how I frame errors in terms of your learning. So what that meant that happened was that the experience that children had in the lesson of good teaching was important, and all teachers thought there was a moment when it kind of all came together. The whole it just worked. And they thought that came about when children felt safe enough to trust the process, so that what was going to happen was going to work for them, that the teacher was bothered that both the group and the individuals got it. And somehow this sort of, the teachers talked about it as synthesis, Zen, the elements all coming together, when the subject knowledge of the teacher, the behaviour of the children, and the ability of the teacher to pass knowledge on all came together. And that's when the very best learning took place. So for the teachers, what they thought was important was that the children, they used their skills to get what they wanted from the lesson, and for children to be able to get what they wanted from the lesson. So the messages that they gave out to the children were that the teacher leads the learning, but that the teacher is prepared to go off plan in order to make it work, and that the teachers are prepared to work with the content so that children get the content at both a surface and a deep level, so that you are proving to the children that they can trust you. So this thing about trust was really important. So that way they gain cooperation, enjoyment, engagement, and the emotions that they displayed in the lessons proved that they were trustworthy. So the teachers saw the subject and what they were teaching in terms of certain sorts of ways, how they made the curriculum, their relationship to the curriculum was that they saw that the curriculum was about being educated in terms of important aspects of the human experience. So that's how they presented the subject to the children. And they talked about that in terms of the children's future agency, how they were going to be able to use this knowledge themselves. That all of the teachers had a sense of the subject in relation to the world or a global perspective. So it wasn't just we've got to know this, it was putting it in that much bigger context. And that they saw that pupils' shape were shaped by the subject. So this dialectical relationship, you're changed by what you know, and you in the lesson contribute to that, so that the subject somehow for the pupils felt real to them in their lives and that they wanted it for themselves. So what teachers thought mattered for the pupils in their lessons was this idea of trust in the teacher, that the teacher was sincere. And what is it when children trust their teacher? What is it that they trust in their teacher? They think their teacher knows stuff, knows the stuff that they're doing, has this command of the school curriculum, is in charge, so that they can relax and let the teacher take them and trust in this process, that the tasks that they are doing are worthwhile, that if they do these tasks it's going to work to them, but that as a teacher responds to them as a human in that they encourage them, and that they will properly answer your questions, so that the teacher, by properly answering questions, is investing in the child as the learner. And so that idea of the lesson, the really good lessons, having this experience, is that what children will get from that is they get a sense of, if I go with this lesson, we're getting somewhere, and I can have confidence in that. That children were proud of what they were doing, that they enjoyed what they were doing, and they enjoyed the pleasure that they got was that they were challenged, but they could relate that knowledge, and that it was worthwhile. And that linked to themselves, how children saw themselves as learners. So that the culture that the teachers had in their class was that for children to think that learning is worthwhile, those messages that as a learner I can do it, and that I'm doing well, however I'm doing well, and that the subject is both important and interesting. And interestingly, that the tasks that were designed were tasks that weren't new tasks, so that nothing was totally new and completely confusing, but somehow that the children felt about it, they were revisiting aspects of things they'd already done before. This idea of building up, layering up that they were doing. So I've done elements of this in terms of the idea that I've got the tools to be able to complete this task. And so with the teacher, how the teacher enacted the curriculum was that they always started with the bigger picture. So the big picture, that very big picture sometimes of why you should love and value this subject, the global perspective, those big pictures there. And then they layered up and revisited and came back to that big picture about the significance of what they were doing. The teacher knows their stuff, and that the children need to know stuff. So that it was that relationship about how children were revisiting and developing their knowledge, and that the development of the knowledge wasn't in a straight line, but via making connections across all aspects of the curriculum, so that they thought in the subject or thought as somebody of that subject. And the teachers all put assessment, how the subject was assessed. So they all knew that that was important, and they all talked to the children about how they were going to be assessed in the subject was important, but they all put that after the learning from themselves. So they thought that the learning was the thing that was put in front of the children, and the assessment came afterwards. Somehow the teachers mediated that for them. So how the teachers taught, so there were these sort of three phases to their teaching. So not a chronological phase, but three ways in which they approach their teaching. So first of all, they introduced the big ideas first, and then they used milestones really as markers. How we're going to get to that big picture. So they kept coming back to the big idea and layering things up. So moving from the big concept and building that up. That they worked on a people level. So the messages they gave to children were in terms of acquiring knowledge. We're all on a continuum. I'm on it and you're on it. And this lesson is all about a continuum moving on to the next level. So it's about this continuously growing and developing in the subject. The teachers related it to the children's experience. So either the teacher's own experience, the pupil's own experience, or they use stories. So it's very much a human process. And that what they tried to do always was to explicitly challenge previous thinking by the unpicking of what we think we know in order to move on to the next level. And then when they thinking that children had sort of grasped that big picture in terms of their approaches to teaching, they were really trying to focus in on getting a bit picky in terms of precision about what was going on, relating that to the detail and accuracy, looking at the technical aspects of things that they were doing, but particularly those ways of thinking, how we should think as a somebody in this subject, that way of thinking. So that in the lessons, what teachers did when they were actually teaching was that in the lessons they would be sometimes digressing to explain things, going off and then coming back, just clearly explaining things, explaining why, giving feedback and acknowledging the effort that it took to learn. So it's not easy, but we are getting there because the teachers were clearly trying to get children from surface to deep level. And they responded to the children in the room. So they tried to adopt the pupils' perspectives. They tried to get the atmosphere right. And their goal was to keep children learning, to get them to keeping on with what was going on in the lesson, so that children could see themselves as somebody who was able to work with the knowledge, work with the subjects themselves. So the key bits really in terms of these ideas are that really what matters to teachers when they teach is that this idea of subject agency, that they want children to do something with the knowledge for themselves, and that they saw themselves as teachers as connecting and communicating where children were with that subject. In terms of school teaching, it was very important that the teachers were trusted by the children, so that the children put their faith in the process and worked with the teacher along that process, and that it was worth taking the risks to be able to get to know things, but that the teacher did that based on a knowledge of the importance of their subject and understanding the importance of being educated and wanting knowledge, wanting it for themselves. But that happened through a process of tasks which enabled children to grapple with, get to grips with, and start piecing things together. So very much this idea of putting new ideas with the old, synthesizing those and developing them.